As we begin, please remember AICC is an international trade association, and as such, members are bound to uphold the letter and spirit of all applicable competition and antitrust laws, including those of the U.S. and Canada. During this meeting, there will be no discussion allowed concerning prices, customers, customer or market allocations, specific accounts, discounts, terms, and all other matters prohibited by law. If this were to happen, we would have to end the call immediately. So now let me introduce you to Mike, who is going to get this started.
Thank you, Taryn. I was just doing a quick scan of who all's here. I was looking for David Goach, as you read the antitrust statement, but I don't see him yet. So just keep an eye out for him in case he should come along.
David is on.
Okay, good. Welcome, everybody. As Taryn said, it's our 6th video conference. I'm starting to see some of the same outfits making another go-around again, as I recall some previous things. Just a reminder to everyone that AICC is keeping a daily COVID update for important links to what you're doing in the industry and what you need for some decision-making going forward. We're not making any recommendations or giving advice there. Since now I know David Goach is listening, I'll say this. We do have a disclaimer there of what it's all about, but remind you to check that out every day, every weekday as we update it. Including we're seeing some changes now from some of the states where we've been seeing closure statements, then extensions of closure statements. Now we're seeing, we're adding some links in that will take you to some of the state's plans for reopening. So hopefully there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and we're recognizing our Georgia folks are on here. They haven't run out to get haircuts or tattoos or going bowling. They're still on the job. And we appreciate that. The president today signed a $484 billion Coronavirus Relief Bill 3.5. So we felt it was appropriate to bring Mitch Klinger of Klinger Nadler Associates back because there was questions about the PPP in round 1, and now that PPP has been officially funded for round 2, some of those questions persist, and perhaps there's some new questions as well. So we'll turn the floor over to Mitch, please.
Thanks, Mike. I have to say, never before have I been asked so many questions by so many people and have had no ability to answer them. It's been very frustrating. The SBA has issued a bunch of Q&As, and they've issued some interim final rules, whatever that means, but they haven't answered a lot of the fundamental questions. So what I'd like to do is just take a couple of minutes recapping what's gone on, where I think we are now, and what the issues are going forward. As Mike mentioned, this morning, the president signed into law H.R. 266, the Paycheck Protection Program and Healthcare Enhancement Act. It's the 5th act that Congress has passed in reaction to the coronavirus pandemic. So far, the SBA has approved 1.6 million loans totaling $350 billion, which was the original funding of this, which is kind of interesting. It means the average loan is about $22,000. You think about that, $22,000, 1.6 million loans. But anyway, they're out of money, so they had to approve some new funds. So this morning they approved $310 billion for additional PPP loans. There was nothing in this act that clarifies anything from the previous act. So they didn't issue any clarifications of anything that was ambiguous from the first act. And I just want to mention that if you have already applied for a PPP loan and were shut out on the funding from the first round, you don't have to put in another application. You're in the queue, and they should act on you quickly now that this money's been approved, but there's nothing that you need to do. Okay, just a brief overview. March 27th, the CARES Act was signed into law, creating the program. On April 2nd, the SBA issued what they called interim final rules. Now we call them the initial rules. On April 4th, they issued an additional interim final rule on affiliation. The next day, they issued some frequently asked questions. On April 8th, they issued more frequently asked questions. On April 15th, they issued a second interim final rule, which dealt with partnerships and self-employed people. And then 2 days ago, or actually yesterday, April 23rd, they issued another round of frequently asked questions. And I'm just gonna, I think there was 35 or 34 questions in that. I just want to pick out 2 of them, which I thought were relevant and interesting. The first one is, question: the amount of forgiveness of a PPP loan depends on the borrower's payroll costs over an 8-week period. When does that 8-week period begin? There's some ambiguity about that. And they've finally cleared that up, saying the 8-week period begins on the date the lender makes the first disbursement to the borrower. Okay, so the minute a nickel hits your account from a PPP loan, the 8-week period begins. And there's been a lot of controversy. I know Senator Rubio and President Trump were making some public comments about public corporations, and I think Harvard got a loan. So also question 31 in the Q&A from yesterday said, do businesses owned by large companies with adequate sources of liquidity to support the business's ongoing operations qualify for a PPP loan? And the answer, I'm not going to read it, it's a rather lengthy answer. The bottom line is, if you're a publicly held company with access to capital markets, you absolutely do not qualify for a loan. As far as some of the box making community who are a little on the larger side, let's say for the independents who have strong balance sheets, you know, you had to make a certification saying that you were impacted by the coronavirus pandemic and you need this loan to maintain normal operations. I don't think the SBA or the IRS is going to come after you based upon the strength of your balance sheet. I think it's a pretty safe bet that you're all impacted by this one way or the other, but you need to think about that, talk to your counsel, and decide whether or not you applied for something that you weren't entitled to. It's not for me to make that determination. I think the SBA has pretty much said, if you're a public company, you better give the money back. And they say in this Q&A that you have until May 7th to give the money back. If you've give it back by May 7th, no harm, no foul. So I'm just putting that out there, that came out yesterday, and that's something that maybe some of you need to think about. I'm advising all of my clients and friends that have applied for this. I think they have a legitimate reason to have this loan. I think there's tremendous uncertainty out there right now, and I think it's justified. But it's been a hot topic, and they did address it in yesterday's Q&A. It's on the SBA.gov site. So I urge you, if you think you're on the borderline and you have a concern about this, take a look at that answer and talk to your counsel about it. Okay, so all of these previous Q&As and interim final rules, they all addressed PPP loan eligibility. Pretty much all of you have made your applications already. You've determined how to calculate the maximum amount. You've made a determination as to whether you're eligible. Maybe you'll rethink it again in terms of the public uprise over strong companies going after these loans. But everything that's gone before has dealt with whether or not you are eligible for a loan and how big that loan can be. Now we have to switch. Now that the funds have been dispersed and it's clear that you have 8 weeks, there's an 8-week clock here that's going to start running. Now we've got to start thinking about PPP loan forgiveness, because that's the second part of this. If you comply with what's in the law, the entire loan gets forgiven. So let's just spend a few minutes talking about what we know and what we don't know about that, and then we'll turn it out for questions. Right now, there's 3 situations that can reduce your loan forgiveness. The first is you don't spend more than 75% of the money on the payroll-related items, and 25% or less on the rent and utility items. So that's fairly clear, although there's some ambiguity as to what counts for payroll and what counts as rent and mortgage interest and that stuff, which we'll talk about. Number 2, if you reduce someone's salary by more than 25%, compared to the January 1st to February 29th period, and you don't restore that salary by June 30th, you will have some reduction in loan forgiveness. And number 3, if your full-time equivalent employees have been reduced during the 8-week period as compared to 2 other testing periods, you will have reduced forgiveness on the loan. The periods are February 15th to June 30, 19, and January 1st to February 9th, 2020. You also need to look at the periods February 15th to April 27th, 20 also to calculate the FTEs. Nobody knows what an FTE is right now. Is it based on a 30-hour week? Is it based on a 40-hour week? Is it based upon industry convention? Is there some Department of Labor rule that they're going to certify? Right now, the CARE Act did not define what an FTE was. So at this point, I think all you can do is for those 4 payroll periods, gather all the payroll hours so that you kind of have the database of hours available. And I would make a preliminary FTE calculation based upon 40 hours and do it consistently for all the periods. At the end of the day, if they change the denominator to 30 or 35 or 37.5, the number of FTEs may change, but the comparison as to whether you've had a reduction will be the same. So if I were you guys, I would start making those FTE calculations. Okay, with that said, the SBA is supposed to issue, according to the CARES Act, and I went back and reread the whole thing last night. There's a couple of instances where they say they have to issue regulations within 30 days of enactment. Enactment, it was signed into law on March 27th. So 30 days from March 27th. March 27th is April 26th, which is Sunday. So presumably Monday morning when we all come to work, there's going to be some regulations that will hopefully clear up some of the ambiguities in this law. Let's just talk about what some of those ambiguities are. The first one, as I mentioned, is how do you make, what's an FTE? There's lots of definitions of FTE. There's a GAO definition, which excludes overtime, which could be a disaster here. I don't think that's the way it's going to play out, but some people think it might. The common law definition, or the most common definition of an FTE, is based upon a 40-hour week. We'll see how that comes out. The Act says that within 8 weeks of receiving your loan, you have to pay costs. You have to make payments on items where the cost was incurred and a payment made. Cost incurred, payment made. Nobody knows what that means. So if you got your loan last Thursday and you're paying a payroll on Friday, but that was for the pay period in the previous week, does that count? Nobody knows right now. And people are calling me up saying, do I move the payrolls around? What do I do, Mitch? I want to make sure I don't screw this up. I have no answer for you. Run your business. Pay your payrolls as you should be paying them right now. And if something comes out early next week that says, no, that payroll from the previous week doesn't count, then you may have to do something with a future payroll to make up for it. Let's see, what else? Is payment of expenses attributable to tax-exempt income deductible? That's a fundamental issue. Right now, they're saying that the PPP loan is forgiven, so it's non-taxable income. There's an IRS, there's a code section that says if you pay expenses with tax-exempt income, you don't get a deduction for it. We need clarification on that. Are the states going to follow the feds and say it's tax-exempt income for the states? Nobody knows, and each state could make a different decision on that one. So that one we're not going to find out about next week, but you better talk to your state legislators and governors and find out how the states are going to treat this. Will payments for equipment leases and interest on equipment debt qualify? The Act talks about mortgage interest. We presume that rent on equipment and interest on equipment will qualify, but we don't know for sure. What if you own your own building, or if you own equipment in a separate partnership? Will those related party rents qualify, or will you have to look to the underlying interest expense in those related entities? We don't know. We don't know. And then a fundamental question, which I don't think anybody has an answer for, but I'm interested to see what you guys are doing, is how are you guys going to convince employees making more money on employment to return to work so that your FTE calculations and your payroll dollars are where they should be? At the end of the day, I have more questions than I have answers for you. Hopefully next week we will have some certainty on these items. With that said, I'll throw it out to the members for questions and comments.
There's somebody has their Stuart, I think, has his hand raised. Stuart.
Did I raise? I didn't mean to raise my hand if it's raised.
Okay, never mind.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. I'm muting you.
Stuart, you know, you can't get your hair cut, but you can shave.
All right, I'm muting you. All right, Steve.
So just a comment on the full-time employee equivalent, Mitch. Roger Poteet writes in, most of your payroll providers can give you full-time equivalents, and you can get to choose which time period you use to compare. So I guess that would be a guidance.
Sure.
And then a question here, Mitch, outside of PPP, can you make a comment about the possibility of payroll tax deferral and how it works?
Well, the CARES Act said that you could defer the employer portion of FICA tax, but if you get a PPP loan, you can't defer it. So you can defer FICA taxes on any periods before you get the PPP loan, but once you've got the PPP loan, that's off the table.
We had two questions emailed in earlier. How are employers looking at vacation time when business is dropped off or when an employee takes time due to COVID-19? An example, the employee is out for 14 days due to self-quarantine and the employer paid his full wages. Then 3 months later, employee asks for vacation and employee expects to be paid.
Well, vacation time counts. That's pretty clear. I think it's also clear that extended family leave time doesn't count.
Karen, I'd be interested if any other members have any comments on that issue. An employee's out for full 14 days due to self-quarantine and is paid full wages, and then 3 months later, the same employee asks for vacation and expects to be paid.
Anybody have a question? Have an answer? Please raise your hand or a response. Is that? I'm going to call on John Burgess. I'm going to unmute you.
Just repeat that question again regarding the sick time out versus the vacation.
Yeah, an employee self-quarantines for 14 days and is paid, and then 3 months later, after this is over, asks for 14 days vacation time and again expects to be paid.
I think that, I mean, in my case, the answer is yes. The 14, we actually put in a special provision in our policies to allow self-isolation time before the government did. But I don't think the two are related. I brought up last week that we'd actually extended our vacation, given additional vacation carryover, because some employees just won't be able to take their vacations this year from either having them cancelled or the needs for us to have them at work. But to me, the two don't relate. If somebody's been sick or self-isolated, that I wouldn't class that as a vacation, and it doesn't go in our world against their vacation allowance.
Thank you, David. Anybody else? Jana, unmuting you.
I agree with you on that. We did have a situation though where we had someone up in the office test positive at our carton company, and someone on the folder gluer got nervous about that and decided to take 2 weeks off. They had no symptoms. They had no interaction with the person up at the front desk. So we looked at that as they needed to take vacation because it was not some criteria that actually fit what we thought would be COVID related.
Thank you, Jana.
Right or wrong in that, but that's what we chose to do.
Thank you, Jana. 262. Is that John Cochi? I don't.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
I'm not 100% sure on this, but I believe the government is paying 10 days because of this. And then our policy is anything beyond that, they are required to take PTO or time off without pay or without penalty. We have had the discussion, depending on where this ends up, we may give an additional 5 days PTO depending on the different scenarios. But I believe that's where we stand with it.
Thank you, John. Steve?
Second question, and this is broader. After this pandemic, what are we as box makers going to do to redesign our businesses for the future? How does our sales, design, customer service, and accounting departments look? We will be having more people working from home and presumably new technology. Anybody have any thoughts?
Raise your hand, please. Michael D'Angelo.
Just a comment. I sat in on a National Association of Manufacturers webinar on Wednesday of this week, the title of which was what does the work environment look like for manufacturers post COVID-19? They had a couple of speakers. One was from Hitachi, I believe, but we've posted that webinar, a recording of it, along with the slide materials we posted it today, as a matter of fact, at the COVID website. So it's a great question. It's a question that there's going to be any number of answers as there are people on this call. But if you wanted to get started with thinking about it or being spurred to think about some things that are kind of out there, I would refer you to the link at the website today, which specifically deals with that question.
Thank you.
Plus whoever else has something to say here.
If you have something to respond, please raise your hand so we can call on you.
Or ask more questions.
Or ask more questions. Steve?
I think everybody knows everything about the pandemic and COVID and PPP and everything else because we're not getting any questions popping through.
Gene Marino has his hand raised. Gene?
So I think, from my perspective, I think we have to understand every individual customer's official policy in terms of developing strategies on how we're going to sell to our customer base. I think this is going to be vital, and I think they're all facing so many unknowns that, I think to the extent that we could expand the approach we use to be a good partner will really drive the success in my mind on how we sell through both the customers and prospects. I think if we try to use a one-size-fits-all approach and either we're on and in the street again, knocking on doors because certain states have eased restrictions, or we're trying to work the phones at states that haven't, it's going to be incumbent that we understand where our customers are coming from. I think if we just try to approach it with a square peg round hole concept, I think it's going to fail.
Thank you, Gene. Tom Nelson, I'm unmuting you.
Are we there?
Yep.
Yep, now I lit up. Thanks. Couple things. First, I wanted to go back to what you asked about changes in the work environment. We were talking about this the other day. Couple things that we noticed. Some of the employees, and I was a little surprised at which ones they were that are working remotely, have indicated that they think it's working really well and would like to continue that into the future. And what surprised me is it wasn't some of the positions, salespeople, you hear that a lot, but this was some of the regular managers indicated that to me. And so my feedback on that question was, I think it's important to talk to your employees right now to understand that, because like I said, I was surprised who told me that. And the other part that came up out of our conversation was an indication that the geographic area that you could draw employees from could be changing dramatically based on the amount or who you're willing to have work remotely and what they could do, and that's something to think about. So for example, for me, being in Milwaukee, it might open up potential employees in Chicago, which is something I really wouldn't think about, depending upon what they were going to do for us. So that's interesting. The other thing that I've been thinking about all day, you know, the motto of Wisconsin is forward. And I really think from our perspective, I'm kind of curious of the other box plants, we're all struggling with this, when is our state going to open and what are they going to do? And I want to take a more active role as a business in our state in trying to convince our governor and our politicians to continue to move incrementally forward in getting our economy open and moving. And I'm wondering what kind of a role organizations like ours and manufacturers like us can do, because it's a location by location situation. It's not something that's generic across the whole country. Northern Wisconsin, there's counties that have had no cases and nobody's up there's got any problems. And then you can go to other parts of our state like Milwaukee where there are some problems. But where we sit in between, there's very few cases and very few issues, and both our customers and our employees are starting to interact more with each other, and you're seeing the restrictions have a lot of stress against them, I guess would be my answer. So I kind of ask our leadership of AICC a little bit, and I don't mean to put you guys on the spot, but what do you think we can do as an organization, and should we do something as an organization to try and move the opening of manufacturing and industry forward?
I'll give you
Well,
Mike.
we've been participating with the National Association of Manufacturers and the Small Business Legislative Council. We've signed on to letters essentially requesting that state governments do just that, where it makes sense. And more to your point, I think, is in states where there is a large urban population that can have a hot spot, but also in Virginia, like where we are, is a state very similar to the northeastern part of the state is in the Washington, D.C. area is heavily urbanized and has more of the state's cases than the western parts of the state or the southwestern parts of the state, yet the entire state is on the same rules. So some of the advocacy that we've been doing, and again, AICC doesn't advocate, you know, we're not over on Capitol Hill, you know, banging the drum, but we have people over on Capitol Hill who are banging the drum for us in positions that we think are responsible positions to take from the point of view of our members. And we know we're not going to have 100% alignment on those issues either. So it remains a work in progress. I would say some of the states that are opening up may be doing so because of not just protesters outside the Capitol building, but because of the people that are connected to their legislators, be they in Washington or be they in the state Capitol. And you're going to see, I think you're going to see more and more of this type of an approach, particularly if the ones that are opening early either don't get into a huge disaster with a recurrence, or the recurrences come in the urban areas, but still no uptick in the ex-urban areas, which should dictate what policy should do depending on where you are. But we continue to, you know, we see, I mean, I mentioned at the onset of this, I see a shift in the information that we're digesting every day to feed onto the website, trending more to what does reopening look like. And it looks different in different states. There were also 7 states that really, you know, or 5 states that didn't shut down at all, and 2 states that shut down certain regions, but not all. So there's there's a quilt approach to this thing because we're 50 states. And I think it's going to just continue that way. And there, you know, we'll leave the politics out of it, but we know there's a political undercurrent too.
Thank you. Jeff Putt, I'm unmuting you.
Hi. Yeah, I just was going to say that this whole thing for us at DeLine Box in Denver has really caused us to reframe sort of our thinking about what constitutes office, what constitutes a full-time employee, and what constitutes this sort of team mentality when you can work remotely. I mean, I've been actually calling our sales reps every 2 weeks and just saying, how you doing? How you holding up? Because they get lonely. And so in our case, things are working really well, oddly enough, which basically challenges that whole assumption that everything has to be a certain way or else it doesn't work. But there are the social aspects that have to be addressed as well as the economic ones. In Denver, I love the fact that the traffic is like so much better that you can actually get everywhere really pretty quickly. So that's kind of nice. So there is one benefit out of all this that actually I can appreciate. But I think it does call the question just in a general way, how we talk about our business, how we interact with our customers, how we interact with each other. Luckily, so far, at least here, it seems to be working, but it's only been 6 weeks.
Thank you, Jeff. Calling on John Petting.
Okay,
Sorry, Mike.
No, go ahead. Unmute whoever you're on.
Unmuting John Pettingill.
Yeah, I just wonder, we heard from our governor today. We're in theory, we've loosened up a little bit effective May the 1st, and then we're going to loosen up some more on the 15th. That's the way it looks right now. I understand Illinois is the 30th. They're right next door to us. I don't know what Wisconsin is. I think my question would be, I wonder if we have anybody from Georgia who is on the call that can kind of fill us in on how they're doing.
Ralph's on the call, but Ralph, have you had contact with any of our box plant members in Georgia?
Well, Martha's on the call.
Is Martha?
From Atlanta Package. Let her go for it.
Martha, unmuting you. Oh, you have to unmute on.
Yeah, we're kind of shaking our heads with this Governor Kemp. You know, up until the past week, we've kind of thought he was an okay person, but kind of questioning what he's doing. Everybody in Georgia's, you know, that I speak with is just kind of shaking their heads. It's kind of reverse where he's opening up the ones that you would think would be opening up the last. I went by a Costco this morning and the parking lot looked like Christmas. It was crazy with how many people are out and lined up to go into the building. But as far as us, you know, with today being the first day that they're opening up, we haven't really seen any impact or any feedback from our customers yet. We're all just kind of shaking our heads, kind of wandering around. I think people in Georgia are going to still do what they feel comfortable doing. I think it all comes down to comfort. And I think most people are pretty questioning what's going on. So I think for the next couple of weeks until other states start following suit with different types of opening, that I think that most people that I run across in Georgia are kind of still in hesitant mode. And again, through the business, we haven't seen any impact or any feedback from employees yet. Customers, sorry.
Thank you, Martha. Anybody else? Please raise your hand. Steve?
Mike's raising his hand there.
Well, just a couple more things, because I love this topic, because we're talking about moving forward, albeit with caution and for all the right reasons. I'll just toss a couple of the webinar that I referenced, a couple of the mega trends, as they're called, that came from that. And the near-term ones, I don't think there's any surprise here. Continued social distancing in the workplace, rolling self-isolations, and spikes in supply and demand. I think the redesign of the process, looking forward now, midterm, coming out of it, remote is the new standard. Goes to what Tom's folks are saying to him. Leverage technology, push for a digital transformation. This one was interesting. The speaker saw a retreat from lean. Gone are the days of single source supply chains. They also see a reshoring of supply chains, which should be somewhat reassuring to everybody on this call. A move toward virtual everything, a realignment to agility in the workplace and with your customers. And I thought this one was interesting. Growth of the gig economy in your business, where you might subcontract a lot more to gig workers to have a lot more flexibility and agility. They didn't go into any specifics in terms of what could be that way. Then, you know, touchless access to the workplace. This one was interesting. Replacement of fixtures with copper. Apparently copper holds the virus or viral substances on its surface far less than other surfaces. So, you know, go out there and speculate in the copper business, if you like. And then circling back, for local advocacy, of course, we would recommend you get involved with your state manufacturing associations, because the NAM has a chapter in every state, and they are very well connected here in Washington at the federal level, but I know they're very well connected at the state level also, and are a good advocate. Thanks.
I'm calling on Tom Nelson.
Thanks, Mike. I thought that was pretty interesting. You perked my ear with one of your comments with lean and sole sourcing. I wouldn't agree or disagree with that, but what struck me, one of the other areas of lean that's been driven a lot is management of inventory. And I think with a lot of the uncertainty, that part of lean is probably going to get a lot more pressure on it. The idea of carrying inventory without certainty those are two opposite ends of a spectrum.
Thank you, Tom. Mike, did you want to say anything, or
nope?
Unmuting Martha Haddon.
So I have to unmute it.
I've got you. You're on.
So just to follow up with when I was stumbling over my words saying employees, as soon as I got off, I was thinking thoroughly through. One of the issues we are going to have is now that this personal contact type of business is opened up between haircuts and tattoo salons and massage salons, whatever, that there is a question and a concern. We did talk to the employees this morning about making sure that you remember when you know that you are keeping yourself safe, but you're also keeping our business safe, which is providing your employment. Because, you know, when they leave our plant this afternoon or any afternoon, we have no control over them. So it brings up the question, you know, we're taking temperatures daily as they enter the building, but from a legal standpoint, you know, we haven't really dug into what questions we're allowed to ask, but that is a concern as the economy opens up and there's more places for people to visit, and ones that are not including social distancing, how that's going to impact, you know, and with Georgia, you know, we're still growing in cases, not on the decline. So I don't know how the governor's even doing this, but employee safety is going to be something that we're going to have to watch closely and probably get some legal advice to say, you know, where have you been this weekend? I know we have a customer in India and they have like a one-page questionnaire that they give their employees. You know, where have you been? What have you done? And we haven't crossed that road other than do the temperature checking.
Thank you, Martha. Anybody want to respond to that? Steve?
Yeah, another a question that has been asked from the supplier standpoint for the last couple of weeks. How do box plants see? How do you see your backlog? How's your business? Are you having any issues maintaining sufficient personnel to keep your machines running? Any significant changes in your product mix? Any box makers want to take that? or be volunteered?
Joe, 262, that's John Cochi, I think.
You guys are all shy out there. I can tell you, you guys have been on the call before and listened to me. We instituted a 1.5 times premium hazard pay for 5 weeks ago. We saw a spike. We've had 2 positive cases. We saw a significant spike up to about 25% absenteeism with the hazard pay. We are now stabilized at around 15% absenteeism. We announced to the organization yesterday that we are going to be, we didn't call it hazard pay, we call it premium pay. We are going to discontinue premium pay because our sales have dropped off about 25%. So, you know, everybody talks about how are you going to undo that? I mean, quite frankly, 95% of our employees understood it, thanked us for helping them out during that time. I would say that our plant is not normal, but it's as close to normal as you can get. Every day we get back 2, 3, 4 people. And our problem is going to be, the next problem is going to be, we got too many people.
Thank you, John. Joe Palmieri?
Hey, Darren. The answer really just depends on your makeup of your accounts. I mean, we've all got essential customers and non-essential customers. And it really comes down to that ratio. I know plants that are extremely busy right now. Others not so busy. It really just comes down to the mix of your accounts and how things break out. One comment on the working from home. I mean, it seems to work right now. I mean, we're experiencing, but once again, it still comes down to how much a business is down. It's working at home. Will it work when you're back up, full strength, running like you were running, say, 2 months ago or last summer? That's what remains to be seen, is can it, working remotely, handle the velocity, particularly on the office side, once things kind of get back to normal, whenever that is.
Thank you, Joe. John Pettingill?
Yes, we've had no problem getting our employees to come in. We've had 2 instances where we've had people that we sent out to be tested and they have come back negative. So once we got the paperwork, we put them back to work. Our business is a little up and down. I would say we're probably, it'd be hard for me to guess because it's still early, but I would think we're probably going to be off 10, 15%. We have really light booking days, and then we have really heavy booking days. We're working we have been closed Fridays the last 2 weeks, but we're working all week this week.
Thank you, John. Steve?
Yeah, just some comments and some direction came in from a couple other members, and I think, Martha, this goes to your questions. OSHA, the Department of Labor, and the CDC have guidance on the kinds of questions and procedures you may ask your employees. And then Kelly from Weber Display comments that the EEOC has released additional guidance on what you can and can't ask, and that was released today.
We'll put that up on the website Monday.
Yeah. I don't see any other questions coming in yet.
Jerry Frisch, I'm unmuting you.
All righty, am I unmuted?
Yep.
You are.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, yep. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Well, you know, living here in sunny Utah, behind the Zion curtain, we call it, it's been interesting because we are not one of those states that Jeff Putt mentioned, or Mike mentioned. We're not a state shelter in place. Our governor has asked us to stay at home, and a couple of our communities have been in shelter in place. So really, our life here has been inconvenienced a bit, but it's nothing like a lot of other states. So I don't know your pain, but I can imagine some of your pain. But I think our governor here has been doing a great job of getting the message out. So going back to that question is, you know, how do you, when you look at your business, what do you see that's going to be different in the future? I think there's a lot of interest. I think that should be a great conversation, because I think we should all learn, you know, I never heard of this because, again, I'm behind this iron curtain. I never hear this stuff, but I've never heard of Zoom 3 months ago. But how is something like Zoom or Microsoft Team going to play into, especially the suppliers or other box makers that have sales guys traveling all around? How's that software going to affect your sales meetings? Do you have to always be all in the plant doing that? We're using it and finding it to be quite enjoyable. I think also looking at outside, I think salespeople in the future, you know, all of a sudden a customer calls in and let's say even it's a new prospect. Are you just going to jump in your car and, like Jeff said, the traffic's a lot better now? But are you going to drive an hour down there just to see a customer and waste your time? Or are you going to maybe use Zoom and to kind of work that thing? And also, or maybe Skype and getting your customer service, your design people in there. Again, maybe you're all doing that now. We just haven't been doing that. I think that we should all be looking at our businesses of what's going to happen in the future. I think we got to figure out how to make our business more transactional, but yet still have the personal touch there. And how to make it easier to do business with us. So I don't know. I think those are just some things. I think also hiring outside, like gig workers, I think that's a very interesting thing. Like even hiring designers from the outside world or other people. So anyways, I think that's something that you and all your managements should really sit and think about it when we come out of this post COVID-19 and what have we all learned and what's going to be all the difference. I think also a lot of people will enjoy staying at home, although they do miss the interactions with people, but it's kind of an interesting time. So anyways, that's all I have for comments. I'll let you go and chew on that.
Thank you,
Take care,
Jerry.
everyone.
And thank you for promoting AICC's we have a 4-part webinar series coming up that that's talking about virtual selling, virtual sales skills, developing virtual relationships. It'd be a good start to the conversation. Steve?
Yeah, here's one. This goes to doing temperature checks. For those that are doing temperature checks, what happens when the temperature is higher than the threshold? Do you make the person take sick, vacation time, excused absence, or is it, or under the CARES Act, COVID time? What happens if that person is used all the COVID time? Has anyone had any experience with that kind of a situation?
If you do, please raise your hand in the participants box. It looks like, I think, nothing yet. John Burgess.
Steve, maybe we can put that one up on the community site as well. So
yeah, that one, it is up on the community site. And so if anybody has any response, please type it in there.
John Burgess has his hand raised.
Yeah, I asked the question because we're going to institute the temperature checks next week in our plants as part of our kind of return to work protocols. And I've heard some people say they send their employee away for 3 days. Some people for the whole 10-day worth of self-isolation. It's a real, do we pay for it? Do we not pay for it? Do we take it from vacation time? How is it accounted for is kind of difficult. And that's the bit I'm struggling with. I'm just interested. Martha, you said you're doing the checks. I assume at this point you've not had anybody that's failed the temperature check then. And Stu, I think you said last time that you were doing checks, right, at your one of your plants with the thermal image camera. Just interested to see if anybody's had somebody come in with a temperature higher than the threshold and what they've done with them. I'm
unmuting Martha. Did you have any?
Just typing in, say, yeah, we haven't had anyone that's come in with a high temperature. We've had some issues with our thermometers on sometimes testing people too low, which we just have to do it a few times to get a normal reading, but we haven't had anyone test high yet, thankfully.
Stuart, did you have a response to that?
first of all, the temperature check that we're doing, we haven't implemented that yet because there's a 2-week lead time on that piece of equipment. So we're waiting for it to come in. I think it's coming in next week or the following week. As soon as we have that in, I can provide feedback on how that's going. That was that infrared scanner that you could do at a distance. I think it was like 10, 15 feet. So you kind of, it's like a camera and you hook up to a computer. But again, we're not 100% sure exactly how it will work and how things will go just yet. Kind of where we are. I do have another question that's unrelated. If I can just throw out there for everybody else for a sec. We have 2 machine installs that we are supposed to do in July. In July, we have pushed them back. One of which is Baumüller, the other one is Gofford, so they can't even come in from the country. Just curious if anybody else is going through a machine install and what their plans are, because we're struggling with what to do with the machine installs, and especially the people come from other countries. One of the machine installs, we have to take out another piece of equipment, and then we're gonna have a revolving door with contractors coming through the building, concrete work, electrical work. The other one is a little bit more simpler with regards to the specialty glower, but again, they can't even come in to install it. So again, just curious if anybody is going through that.
I'm unmuting Tom Nelson.
Waiting for my box lit up. Back to what I said originally about moving forward and things being regional. I don't know exactly where your plant sits, but as we speak, we have some AICC member suppliers in our building right now doing work on equipment. And we had no problem as far as concerns working with them. They gave us plenty of information about where their employees have been and their health history. We're planning to schedule more repairs and maintenance in the coming months, both with local contractors and people from around the country. As long as we can get a good history of where they've been and what they're doing, our position is we're going to take advantage of the opportunity with the downtime to make improvements to and maintenance to our equipment in our facilities.
Thank you, Tom. Anybody else, please raise your hand.
Taryn, Jeff Putt has a comment on machinery installation.
Okay, I'm muting Jeff. Jeff, you got to unmute yourself, I think.
Okay, I'm unmuted.
There you go.
All I said was we're having a Gofford put in the fall, and we haven't had any indication that that's going to change yet. But of course, it's all dependent upon what happens this summer, I think.
Thank you, Jeff. Steve?
Yeah, just a few, continuing on temperature checks. You might want to ask Michael S. to comment. Is that Mike Schaefer, perhaps?
Let me pull him up. Okay, Michael, unmuting you. Michael?
Can you hear me?
I can.
Yes.
Okay.
Is that Michael Schaefer?
Mike Soule from Royal.
Oh, okay, Mike Soule.
Hey, Mike.
Yeah. So we have hired nurses, and based on the local economy, a lot of hospitals are laying off nurses, which seems kind of counterintuitive in this crisis. But through an agency, we were able to bring in nurses on a very short-term notice to start taking temperature checks at a couple of our facilities. And we're providing masks to all the workers in those facilities.
Thank you, Mike. Steve?
Mike, you just, while you're on the line here, you also asked a question here. Have any members who have had COVID-19 cases had to deal with any social media driven concerns from your local community or outside advocacy groups? Anybody comment?
He's not muted, so he can, he muted himself again.
Oh, yeah, and the reason I asked that is one of our customers They had a couple of early COVID cases, and they're one of the largest employers in the town they're in, and there was a lot of social media backlash based on their perceived response in the community. And there was some sort of immigrant rights group that became involved, even though this plant has a union. So just wanted to see what sort of experience other members may have had regarding kind of the social impact caused by any COVID cases they've heard or had or heard of any that their customers may have had.
Thank you, Michael. Unmuting John Cochi.
Yeah, we have had none of that backlash at all from the employees or the community. I'm not sure how the community would really know. You know, through HIPAA, you got to keep all that stuff pretty mum. I will tell you though, we had two larger clients that sent us letters weeks ago saying, if you have any cases, we want to know about it. We sent it to our counsel, and he basically ended up advising us that that's a business decision, so you can decide what you want to do on that. You're not legally required to do that, so you make a business decision on that.
Thank you, John. Steve, it's in your court.
Yep. Here's one from Martha. Is anyone isolating your workforce from outside contractors if these contractors are allowed to come on site? Are you isolating your workforce from outside contractors if those contractors are allowed to come on site?
Calling on Tom Nelson.
Yes. So for the situation we have today, we have a machine down and a section of it is being rebuilt. And the outside contractor is over there as well as one of our maintenance people, and that's it. They're not interacting with the rest of the employees. It's easy to kind of segment out the area as well as where he's supposed to go and what they're supposed to do when they're here. We also indicated what entry and exit we want them to use, and we discussed face masks and that kind of thing too.
Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's it.
Okay.
You don't want me talking forever.
I don't mind. Dave Burgess, I'm unmuting you. Or you have to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, so for the few installations that we've done, our techs, first of all, the customers have been asking a fairly extensive survey about the tech's history for the last month or so, where they've been, what they've done, have they been abroad, etc. They've been asked to bring in their own PPE, and they've been told what PPE is required by each individual plant. And then they've just been asked to keep an appropriate social distance. They haven't really been isolated away from the plant. So, you know, the plants are trying to organize everything prior to the tech's arrival to make sure that they're not, you know, deeply involved with the rest of the plant. They're getting on with the installation, but it's certainly not isolation.
Thank you, Dave. Steve, I don't see any other questions, and if you don't see any, I will turn it back over to Mike.
No, we're clear on this end.
Yep.
Okay,
Mike.
well, thank you. I want to thank everybody for attending once again. I want to thank Mitch for sharing his views and his expertise. I want to thank everyone who asked questions and answered questions, both verbally and in the chat box. AICC will continue to provide the information that you need. Refer to the website, please. I mean, we also have a separate listing on that website of PPE that's available from members or through members that have made other referrals to us, including some sources of temperature thermometers and the thermal imaging type equipment. We've got some webinars coming up that I'd like to just share with you very quickly. The Think Tank Bottleneck webinar series continues next Tuesday, April 28th, with another one on the following Tuesday. Taryn had mentioned the Navigating CRM webinar. That's Thursday at April 30th. We have 4 webinars on selling starting next month that'll be hosted by Ed Wallace and Mark Roberts. Social Skills on May 12th. Accelerating Virtual Relationships on May 19th. Launching Virtual Relationships on May 26th. and a virtual sales skills webinar on June 2nd. And then finally, to wrap up, just the one thing that we've been seeing throughout all of these message boards and webinars and all of the discussions that we've been on in the 6 weeks that we've been up to our next in this thing is you can't under communicate with your employees, both those in the plant as well as those working from home. So please do keep up the good work and stay in touch with your people. Have a great weekend. Stay well. Thank you very much. And please let AICC know how we can help in any way, shape, or form.
Thank you. Bye, everyone. Have a great
Bye.
weekend.
Bye, everybody.